your consideration, the Jericho.
The machine you're seeing right now is called Legion Jericho Carrier, but I'll come back to it later. In this video I'll explain a few glitches, how a few glitches work, and talk about four-link suspensions, which are often used in rock crawlers and rock bouncers. Now, for those who don't know what those are, rock crawling is to hard moves, climbing, as rock bouncing is to speed climbing. So let's jump right in with different suspension setups. The first one is a parallel setup, and it requires a track bar to locate the axle on the lateral axis. After that we have the triangulated setup. From what I've seen, when only one pair of link is triangulated, it's the upper one. It eliminates the need for a track bar because both links which are placed at an angle resist a part of lateral forces. And finally we have my favorite, the double triangulated, where both pair of links are triangulated and help resist lateral forces on the axle. That's the one I'm going to be focusing on because it's the coolest in my opinion, and it's the most commonly used in extreme off-road vehicles that I've seen. This is a more complete rock bouncer I built, and I'm going to use it to show you about squat, roll axis, and rear steer. Let's start with the basics of squat ratio. First of all, what is it? Squat is when the rear of the body moves down while accelerating, which means less weight is applied on the wheels, resulting in less traction. The only thing I could see squat being useful for in Besiege is if you have very fast wheels and want them to spin out a bit at the start to get a more gradual acceleration. Next we have neutral squat, when the body doesn't move up or down while accelerating, and that provides the most constant handling. After that, anti-squat. That's when, you guessed it, the rear of the body raises while accelerating. That provides more traction by forcing the wheels down on the ground, sometimes violently. In Besiege, the best way to know how a suspension behaves is to test it, but here's how it works in non-virtual cases. Take a look at the rear axle from this point of view. While accelerating, the wheels rotate clockwise, applying counterclockwise torque on the rear axle. This means the lower links push on the body and the upper links pull. Okay, that part wasn't important, but imagining how those forces interact helped me understand the whole thing. Tracing the imaginary extension of the upper and lower links allows to find the instant center, which is located at their intersection. And that's one of the two important things to understand squat ratio. Second important thing is the 100% anti-squat line. Sounds fancy, but it's pretty easy to trace. First, place a point on the rear wheel's contact patch with the ground. Second point is at the intersection of two lines. One is vertical and goes through the front wheel's contact patch, and the other is horizontal and goes through the center of mass. And there you go. The 100% anti-squat line goes through those 2 points. When the instant center is on the line, the acceleration produces neutral squat. Under the line produces anti-squat, and over produces squat. Also, some of you might have heard other sources using center of gravity instead of center of mass, but in this case, since the gravitational field is uniform across the whole vehicle, those are in the same location. Alright, moving on to roll axis, which affects the suspension's ability, you might have guessed it, to roll. Generally speaking, attaching lower links further apart on the body lowers their divergent angle, which restrains roll a bit. This is good for high speeds, like with rock bouncers. However, Extreme 4x4 recommends a divergent angle of at least 40 degrees. Roll axis is more or less important in Besiege, so rather than trying to explain the geometry in more details, I'll just add a link, no pun intended, in the description to this free 4-link calculator I just found. And finally, rear steer, which is the amount of back and forth movement a wheel makes as it moves up and down. A lot of rear steer, meaning the wheels go far forward as they move up. This is generally not a good thing, but the right amount of rear steer can be useful in certain situations. It's more complex than that, but a general rule of thumb would be shorter upper links give more rear steer. Alright, finally done talking about real suspensions. That was longer than I thought.
Cruising in my lane fast, call it high speed. I've been working hard, yeah.
That song was apparently playing when I recorded, and I decided to leave a little part in. Alright, you just saw the grasshopper in action. It uses the mass rigidity glitch and the scale rigidity glitch to make a suspension without articulated parts. I made this setup to better illustrate those glitches. You can see all outer ballasts are set to 50. The inner blocks on the left were either scaled down or set to low mass, and those on the right were left to their default values. In my experience, suspensions with at least one non-articulated flexible link of this type allow for surprisingly high wheel speed without too much vibration. Another big advantage with those glitches is that they can extend the elastic limit, which is the limit stretching before permanent deformation occurs in physics, and it's the limit at which something breaks in Besiege. As you see, I can pull the wheel hub pretty far from its natural position before it breaks. Another glitch this machine uses is the propeller thrust glitch. I tried showing a bit how it worked in a previous video, but I didn't actually explain what makes it tick. So here we go. The direction of minimum drag and the direction of maximum drag are at an angle of 23.06876 degrees instead of being perpendicular, which means propellers can generate thrust without producing drag. Let's see how that works. The direction along which propellers have the most drag is perpendicular to their hitbox, the green thing you're seeing. Now, this setup seems like it would rotate while moving down, but since both propellers' hitboxes are parallel with the ground, both sides apply maximum drag, and it simply falls in a straight line. The direction along which propellers have no drag at all is parallel to their model, the wooden part you're normally seeing. I aligned all models to be parallel so the setup experiences zero drag from the propellers while moving forward. Also, all hitboxes are slanted in the same direction so they produce thrust when the vehicle falls because of gravity. That's how I built my ultra-fast engineless gliders. I also used two propellers oriented in that way on the grasshopper to help it glide for a long time. With a bit of additional knowledge about blocks' properties, one can build a propeller engine able to reach escape velocity. Let's take a look at the block chart I created. If you want a copy, no need to take screenshots, there will be a link in the description. The important thing to notice here is that some blocks don't have drag. This means that by using only those blocks and perfectly aligned propellers, you can build an engine which outputs constant thrust and has absolutely zero drag. That's right, unless it breaks at some point, engines like this one can accelerate to infinity and beyond! Sadly, it does break apart around 11.6 kilometers per second, but that's okay. Escape velocity is approximately 11.2 kilometers per second, so I'm satisfied. This would be a good space travel engine. Except that propellers don't do anything in space. Okay, it would be a good space launch system. Except maybe for the fact it can't really carry anything. Okay, whatever, it's still fast as f***. Now, finally, let's get back to the machine you saw at the beginning of the video, the Legion Jericho Carrier. This one uses quite a few glitches. The three ones we already saw, so aligned propeller hitboxes to help it glide, and both mass and scale rigidity glitches in the suspension. If you've been paying attention up until now, you might have noticed the rear suspension looks like a 4-link suspension with more links. If you did, good job, because that's exactly what it is. I doubled every link for sturdiness, and since each link is actually a flexible scaling block, there's no need for any additional pieces to make the suspension stiffer. The weaponized bumper bar you saw at the beginning of the video is also an extension of the mass rigidity glitch because it's made out of ultra-low mass ballots which twitched at insane speed when they're forced away from their natural position. Alright, now on to how I built the two-stage Jericho missile. Each missile has a 100,000 explosive charge rocket warhead, which burns for 10 seconds before exploding, but can also explode on impact with the rest of the missile. It also carries 12 bombs, called bomblets in the case of cluster ammo, which are scaled down to 0.1 in all directions to fit perfectly inside the hitbox of a half-pipe scaled down to 0.1 in X and 0.27 in Z. And those are held in by a ballast attached to a 0.01 explosive charge rocket at the back, which burns for 1.5 seconds. When the rocket explodes, it releases the bomblets without triggering them, and that's how you make an automated two-stage or even multi-stage missile. Another glitch both the Grasshopper and the Legion use is the mass displacement glitch, which affects braces when they're scaled down along their length. The thing to know is that both ends of braces are not the same. I call them the origin and the tip. The origin, which is the first end you place, attaches to only one buildable surface at the time, and the tip, which is the second end you place, attaches to all buildable surfaces it touches before you start the simulation. Also, if neither are attached before the simulation starts, the origin won't attach to anything, and the tip will attach only to the first buildable surface it touches. So, if I asked which end of braces can attach to multiple buildable surfaces, the answer would be...
Just the tip? Just the tip! Just the tip!
Are you gonna pay for your lunch?
Just the tip.
Thank you, Sterling. Now, as you see, the setup is balanced, and by scaling the brace, I can move its center of mass towards the tip, which is the end attached to the starting block. As you get closer to zero scale, the center of mass moves exponentially towards the brace tip, which is why 0.01 scale moves so slowly. The center of mass is super far on the left and has to travel a lot of distance for very little rotation of the starting block, which also gives it a lot of momentum. So I use scaled down braces for two reasons. First is their reduced rigidity, and second, to lower the center of mass of the whole machine. Alright, let's move on to the last glitches and last machine I want to show you in this video. This is the Respondendum Ad Omnia B42. Its name means answer to all because it carries 42 bombs. It's a reference to the movie Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in which the answer to everything is 42.
The answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything is... "42. Yes, I thought it over quite thoroughly. It is, it's 42. It would have been simpler, of course, to have known what the actual question was.
But it was the question.
This machine uses negative water cannons, commonly called knives, as thrusters because they don't emit water particles and they're invincible. I also use overflow water cannon for the hover mode. Those are water cannons set to 1 E plus 24. That's 1 followed by 24 zeros, or 1 quadrillion, and they create drag instead of thrust. And that's it. That's all I had for this video. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day. Respondendum Ad Omnia B42. Respondendum Ad Omnia B42. Respondendum Ad Omnia B42. So this setup... sorry.
Legion Jericho Carrier. Legion Jericho Carrier.
Pro Die 4 recommends a divergent angle. Now, as you see, this setup is balanced, and by scaling the brace, I can move its center of mass towards the tip, which is... sorry.
Morty's a gifted child. He has a special mind. That's why he's my little helper. He's like me. He's gonna be doing great science stuff later in his life. He's too smart for school. He needs to keep hanging out and helping me.
In Besiege, the best way to know how something behaves is to test it. But here's how it works in non-virtual cases. In Besiege, the best way to know how something behaves is to test it. But fuck. Three interesting First, place a point on the rear. I have a hard time saying that word. When only one pair of link is triangulated, the only one I've ever seen is the upper one. No, that's not it. 12 bombs also carries 12 bombs called bomblets. It also carries 12 bombs called bomblets in the case of cluster. It also carries 12 bombs called bomblets in the case of cluster ammo. It also... Mike. If God existed and had low self-esteem, would that make him an atheist?